Autumn is arguably the best season of the year. There's no better time to grab yourself a hot beverage and read a good book. Or, multiple. I mean, it's getting colder out, there's fewer hours of daylight, you have a pretty good excuse to stay inside and read. So around this season, I like to read something cozy, something comforting, something I read pretty much every season. And that, for me, is epic fantasy. So I'm gonna recommend 7 epic fantasy books to binge read in autumn. Starting off with sort of a fantasy comfort food, that is The Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman. This is the first book in the Dragonlance Chronicles. Did I pick this book just because it has autumn in the title? Maybe. But nevertheless, these books are very epic and highly bingeable. So let's take a brief look at what this is about. The story follows a group of friends who are reunited after vowing to spend 5 years investigating the growing evil in the land. They made an oath to meet at an inn at a specific date, and this is where we meet the colorful cast of characters. Being led by Tanis the half-elf, the group is caught up in a war they didn't know existed, in a world where dragons are trying to take over the planet. Now, the reason I call this fantasy comfort food is because it's classic 80s role-playing fantasy. It's fairly straightforward, it has a lot of fantasy cliches, but it's fun. Now, I haven't read this since, middle school, and even then I think I only read the first 2 in the series, but from what I can remember, I would definitely recommend it if you're into classic fantasy. Autumn can be beautiful. The leaves are vibrant and colorful, the air is nice and cool, with the smell of nature slowly decaying. Well, maybe you are tired of all that beauty. I don't know why you would be. Well, then the Mistborn books by Brandon Sanderson is the series for you. In the world of Scadrial, ash constantly falls from the sky, the plants are brown, and there's a mysterious mist that appears at night. So while this world was once bright and colorful, it's now kind of bleak and depressing. But what's not depressing is the main theme of hope. In these books, the people have every excuse to not have hope. I mean, the world is an ash-covered mess, and being ruled by an immortal tyrant who enslaved his people, placing nobility above them. But a young street urchin named Vin ends up joining a group of revolutionaries led by a man named Kelsier who wants to bring hope to the people. He's working on a desperate plan to form a crew of allomancers to cause a house war and overthrow the Lord Ruler. Allomancers are what make up the very unique magic system. These are people able to ingest metals and then burn them to gain certain abilities. Most allomancers are mistings, meaning they can only use one of these metals and gain one of these powers, but there are the rare Mistborn who can utilize all of these. I would definitely recommend the Mistborn books. Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors, and there's also a secondary series that you can read after that takes place in sort of a steampunk western setting, which is really awesome. The Eye of the World, book 1 in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan and finished by Brandon Sanderson. I actually just made a review for this book, so if you want to learn more information and my thoughts, then check that out. But in short, the story starts in a small village with our protagonist Rand al'Thor and his friends. The village is attacked by creatures called Trollocs as well as Murdril, and a mysterious woman named Moraine and her warder Lan tell Rand and his friends that these creatures are after them because they are Taviren, meaning they are chosen to influence the pattern that makes up the Wheel of Time. And to protect their village, they must accompany her to the White Tower, home to the mysterious Aes Sedai. This is, of course, a very brief description of the beginning of this book. There is still so much more, and I'm still new to the series, but I am really enjoying it. Transitioning from the timeless classic that is the Wheel of Time, we have another timeless series. Get it? 'Cause that's the name of Salvatore's new book. I'll let myself out. I'm talking about the Legend of Drizzt series by R.A. Salvatore, specifically starting with the Dark Elf Trilogy. Man, these books I read a lot throughout high school. I believe there's now 34 books in the series, and I think I got up to about book 10, but then I went back and reread some of my favorites over and over again. Eventually, this is a series I do plan on finishing. However, since many of them are kind of episodic, you don't necessarily have to read them all. This trilogy tells the origin story of the iconic drow Drizzt Do'Urden and his magical panther. We follow his upbringing with the drow in Menzoberranzan, which is a city in the Underdark, a vast subterranean world. making a rather dark setting. Unlike most drow, Drizzt was born with principles, and such feelings as morality makes Drizzt an outcast amongst his people. These books follow him as he traverses the Underdark and faces many dangers, before ultimately reaching the surface world and discovering he's also an outcast there. Because of his skin, he's looked at with much prejudice, as drow don't have the best reputation. After all, drow are inherently evil, a big red flag being that they commonly have red eyes. But Drizzt has purple eyes, so he's different. And I find that these books go by really quickly, and I think that has to do with Salvatore's writing style. He's not the best at making really beautiful prose, but he does write action scenes really, really well. There's actually some of the best sword fighting that I've read. You hear that, autumn wind? Well, keep listening because you might just hear the name of the wind. Subscribe. Wait, I thought I heard something. Subscribe. It's probably nothing. The Name of the Wind, Book 1 in the Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. Fair warning, this trilogy is unfinished. We're still waiting on that third book, Pat. If you're familiar with my channel, you may have seen I've made multiple theory and lore videos on this series, to keep me sane as I wait for the third one. In this book, we're introduced to an innkeeper named Coat. It's soon revealed this innkeeper is hiding his identity, and he's actually the legendary wanted man named Kvothe. He agrees to tell the story of his life to the chronicler. Kvothe narrating his past is what makes up the main story. We go from his early life, being raised by leaders of an Ademaru troupe, learning how to play the lute and all kinds of storytelling and stage talents, as well as sympathy, a sort of energy manipulation which he learns from a man named Abinthy, to the tragic death of his family by a mysterious group called the Chandrian. We see him on the streets homeless, struggling to survive, all the way up to his time at the university, learning various fields of study like sympathy, alchemy, and naming, all the while struggling with tuition fees and a rival schoolmate whose last name almost rhymes with jackass, which is rather suiting. Kvothe's main goal is to find out more about the Chandrian and eventually seek out vengeance for his family's death. Unfortunately, not much is known about the Chandrian other than fairy tales. Now, what I really love about this main character is that, yes, he's a genius, but this is sharply juxtaposed by the fact that he's also an idiot. He makes a lot of foolish mistakes, and he often lets bursts of anger and his own pride get the better of him. Actually, a lot of his problems are caused by his own mistakes, and oftentimes, a lot of his accomplishments happen by accident. And I think this is why I really like his character. Luckily, there is a great subreddit and a bunch of fan theories to keep you occupied. If you want beautiful prose that reads almost like poetry and some of the best music I've ever seen written in a book, then I recommend picking up the Kingkiller Chronicle. The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I'm not going to go into the storyline for these ones because you should know what they're about. Both of these have a warm place in my heart. They're definitely a comfort read for me. But The Hobbit especially is a book I love to reread around fall or winter. It depends on where you live, but here we tend to get some storms in the fall. And there's no better book series to read during a storm than the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, starting with The Way of Kings. In the world of Roshar, what are known as high storms wreak havoc on the land. These storms have shaped much of the ecosystem and how people live their day-to-day lives, from building their houses facing the opposite direction to their currency, which is charged with stormlight from a high storm. Now, in the past, there were reoccurring events that would happen called desolations, where creatures called Voidbringers would appear to attack the people of Roshar. To combat these Voidbringers, there arose an order known as the Knights Radiant. These men and women wore shard plate and wielded shard blades, both of which bond to the user and make them near invincible. On top of that, they had extraordinary powers. However, they were known to have eventually betrayed mankind by abandoning their blade and plate and disappearing. Now, the main story follows many different characters, but I'll briefly mention three important ones. There's Dalinar, a high prince, brother to the assassinated king, and a famous shard bearer who's fighting a war on the Shattered Plains. Recently, he's been seeing visions during high storms that hint at a new desolation. Then there's Kaladin, a spearman turned slave who's sent to work with a bridge crew in the Shattered Plains. A mysterious spren that he names Syl is able to communicate with him and follows him throughout the book. And they are both awesome. And then there's Shallan Devar, who, because of a desperate situation, has to travel to Kharbranth and receive training as the ward to a famous scholar named Yasna Kholin. Shallan is also an artist, and the books actually include a lot of her drawings. Again, this is a very brief look at the story and the characters. There is so much more, and these characters are some of my favorites. I will officially say that the Stormlight Archive, at least for right now, is my favorite fantasy series. And while I only have one video that's a review of The Way of Kings on my channel, you should be expecting a ton of Stormlight Archive videos pretty soon. This includes reviews, summaries, lore videos, and theories. So those are 7 epic fantasy books that I would recommend reading in the fall if you're up for an adventure. And hey, if any of these books interested you, I'll leave links in the description to where you can buy them. Also, feel free to let me know in the comments which books you're currently reading, or if you've read any of these, and what are some of your favorite books you like to read in the fall. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in another video. Being finished by Brandy Sandison.